Howdy, folks. Mr. Reardon here. I'd like to walk you through one of our next major topics in AP English Language and Composition, which is the rhetorical appeals. So, I'd like to start with just a little quick review of rhetorical situation and in particular, the pieces of rhetorical situation that are going to be the most relevant to our discussion of the rhetorical appeals. The piece that is going to be the most helpful to you when thinking about rhetorical appeals is purpose. So I will always ask you to figure out the rhetorical purpose of a text before you then try to figure out what the rhetorical appeals are in that text and how they're functioning to convey to help achieve that purpose. So I'm going to show you a few AP exam prompts here. These are released AP exam questions. This is question 2, the rhetorical analysis question, on the AP exam every year. In May 2020, students took a very much abbreviated AP English Language and Composition exam remotely due to the pandemic, and that exam was actually only one essay instead of the normal 3 plus a bunch of multiple choice. And that one essay was rhetorical analysis. So I think that tells you that the rhetorical analysis skills are really the most important ones. And if you can do this, then you can do the other two things. You can write the other 2 essays and you can do the multiple choice fairly well. So we're going to look at these rhetorical analysis questions because I think they're the most relevant to our discussion of rhetorical appeals. So 2012 exam, write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies President Kennedy uses to achieve his purpose. Right? He is the prompt is asking, figure out what rhetorical strategies the author's using, talk about how they achieve the purpose. 2014, right? In a well-developed essay, analyze the rhetorical strategies Adams uses. This is Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams uses to advise her son. So they give you purpose there, but it's the same thing. What strategies are used to achieve that purpose? 2016, right? In a well-developed essay, analyze the rhetorical strategies Thatcher uses to convey her message. So again, it's purpose, message, sort of the same thing here. So again, you can see like decisions the author's making, rhetorical strategies, conveying rhetorical purpose. 2018, in a well-developed essay, analyze the choices Albright makes to convey her message to the audience. So here you can see that the language shifted a little bit. They're now using the word choices instead of rhetorical strategies. That's going to be true, I imagine, for the May 2021 exam as well. It was true for 2019, the Gandhi piece, and 2020, which was on a number of different texts, depending on who you were. So all of these prompts share this general structure: rhetorical choices to message. Now, the most important thing here is that you understand you will have to consider not only what the author's purpose or message is, but how the author works to convey it. What is the mechanism by which this author conveys that message or achieves that rhetorical purpose? The mechanisms are actually quite complex, and it's my job to make sure that you can understand exactly how that persuasion or how that argumentation is structured and taking place, and that you can write about it in a structured way. So there are 3 primary rhetorical strategies. I feel weird about calling them that because that's not really the language we're going to use moving forward for them. But there are 3 like basic rhetorical strategies that underlie the most obvious rhetorical strategies. The sort of 3 underlying strategies are going to be called the rhetorical appeals, or the Aristotelian rhetorical appeals, because Aristotle is generally the ancient associated with developing and talking about them. So I mentioned the strategies that are at the surface level, the ones that are the most observable. Those smaller strategies include things like metaphor, allusion, rhetorical question, parallel structure. All of these like things you can just point to and say, "Hey, look, there's a rhetorical strategy right there." Those do help an author to achieve a purpose, they do so through the rhetorical appeals. You can't go straight from metaphor to purpose. You have to go through an appeal first. That's just how That's how argumentation works. That's how persuasion works. So we're going to be talking about the rhetorical appeals first. We're kind of working backwards here. Purpose, then rhetorical appeals, and then finally we'll get to all those little strategies. We're not talking about all those little strategies yet. So the rhetorical appeals are labeled with words we've borrowed from Greek. So we're going to walk through each. They might be Greek to you right now, but they won't be for long. These are ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, it's important you remember when you write about these, you will not use the Greek terms. You will use the English terms: credibility, emotion, and logic instead. So ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, logos, logic. You should know the Greek. You should know what they mean, but you'll be using the English words in when you actually refer to them in your rhetorical analysis. So ethos is first. You have ethos on your hands when the author is working to accomplish his or her rhetorical purpose by building credibility with the audience. Building credibility, making himself or herself, or any other pronoun self, more credible or seem more credible in the eyes of the audience. An author might build his or her credibility by making known his or her or any other pronoun expertise on a topic. So if someone communicates that they have a substantial degree, even if it's not direct, if they just happen to mention it somewhere, or they put it near their name in an email signature or something like that, right? This would be an example of someone communicating their credentials, and therefore building credibility. If someone makes direct or indirect reference to, or even just holds some position of power or influence, or is a well-known person, that alone can help them to build credibility. So yeah, I mean, if someone is a king, right? Many texts gain their credibility, rather build credibility with the audience simply because the speaker is, King George III or something. Being president of the United States automatically conveys a level of credibility. Being a religious leader, right? If a religious leader is talking on topics of religion, they have more credibility. The right public figures and famous people also. There's a risk of a false authority fallacy, that is a weak, fallacious argument. If someone who doesn't have the proper credentials or credibility with the audience to make claims about a certain subject, so beware of that. But generally, right, just a person's position of power or influence can help someone to build their credibility. Also, writers will often clarify, sometimes repeatedly clarify, their shared identity or values or realities or life experiences with their audience, and try to just make those connections between themselves and their audience really clear. And that's a way to build credibility. So many of the texts that we'll look at together coming up will involve writers. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. comes to mind. Writers that like to refer often to the fact that they are Christian and their audience is also Christian, and the people that they're trying to convince are also Christian, right? And so this shared Christianity can really help to further the argument, because there's this shared belief system that that Christianity is good, Christians are good. If doing this thing is Christian and I'm a Christian, then I should be doing this thing. There is even a logical bit there, but it's really an argument of credibility. If you're Christian and your audience is also Christian, they're more likely to trust you. That's the ethos piece. There's also the like, I'm just a regular guy like you argument, the humility type argument. This can be this can be quite effective. I think this actually, you know, uh, I'm like you argument helped to help Donald Trump be elected to the presidency of the United States in 2016. And it's of course that's not the only place in which that argument is effective. It has been successful in a number of different circumstances. Okay, so and what we're going to talk about here is logos. So logos or a logical argument means that an author is accomplishing his or her purpose or trying to accomplish his or her purpose by building a clear, logical, reasonable, and rational argument. An author might build a rational, logical argument by making a clear claim that defines the boundaries of the argument. So X is true only when Y is true. All right, this would, if you if you get to an argument where you one of the first things someone's doing is establishing the boundaries of the circumstances under which what they're saying applies, they're probably making a logical argument. Logical arguments like include uh, specific details, facts, examples, expert testimony, data, statistics. So, all the kinds of evidence that you learned about just recently were historical evidence, expert opinion, quantitative data, all those things are typically found in logical arguments. And all of those are examples of logos. You can see that like surface thing to rhetorical appeal to rhetorical purpose structure already a little bit here. Right, bit of quantitative data equals logos equals purpose. Um, so charts, graphs, visuals of any kind, those generally contribute to logical argument. The Here's an example, right? We should change back to the old bell schedule. 81% of students reported liking it better. Right, that quantitative data there helps to support this claim of policy. We should change back to the old bell schedule, and the argument being made there is one of logos. So, anytime a writer is trying to clarify causality, right? X caused Y, then that would be a logical argument. Of course, be careful if you're writing. Correlation does not mean causation, right? I love this example, right? California tends to lack weather extremes in its populated areas. It also has a low obesity rate, therefore, weather extremes make people obese, right? Well, that's actually those two things happen to be correlated, but they're definitely not. There's definitely not a causal relationship there. If you could find some third or fourth or fifth degree element that could link weather extremes and obesity, maybe people in places that have nice weather only a few weeks a year are less likely to go out and exercise, and therefore there's a higher obesity rate. I don't know. I just made that up, but like that, just these two pieces of information here would be an example of someone trying to make a false logical argument, a fallacious argument, by conflating correlation and causation. If an author can successfully um, use data and facts and statistics and claims of fact supported by facts to convincingly argue that a causal relationship exists between things, well, that's definitely an example of logical argument. Acknowledging, conceding, and refuting counter arguments. If you see that going on, probably a logical argument going on. Logos would be that intermediate piece in the three-step uh, surface level rhetorical strategy to rhetorical appeal to purpose rhetorical analysis paradigm. So, example of that, right? She says XYZ, and I agree with X, but not Y and Z, and here's why. That would be an example of a logical argument you might see written by somebody somewhere. Okay, so I want to mention here that a logical argument, logos, is at its most fundamental form based on something called a syllogism. You should definitely know what a syllogism is at this point in AP Lang. A syllogism uh, has three parts: a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. A major premise makes a general statement that can be true or false. So, for example, all cats meow. The minor premise makes a statement about something, about a specific thing, typically a specific thing already mentioned or implied in the major premise. So, Carbon is a cat. There she is. Um, that's my cat, by the way, if anyone's watching this and doesn't realize that. Just took that photo a few minutes ago. So the conclusion then is a statement that can be deduced from those two premises, can be figured out from those two premises, assuming both premises are true. So Carbon meows. All cats meow, major premise. Carbon is a cat, minor premise. Carbon meows, conclusion. So if either premise of a syllogism can be proven false, the conclusion is false. If you know the conclusion is false, at least one premise must be false by definition. So here's an example: all cats bark. Carbon is a cat, therefore Carbon barks. Well, carbon or all cats bark is false, even though Carbon is a cat is true, right? Negative times positive is a negative. So because one of the two premises is false, it makes the conclusion false. Generally, in even if you said um, something like all cats bark, Carbon is a dog, and then conclusion Carbon barks, they're all still false, right? But in that case, both premises are false. There's almost no connection between the premises and the conclusion, and at that point, it's just really nonsense. It's hardly even a syllogism, but you get the picture. You can think about this as a really formal, logical, even mathematical. And if you study formal logic later in your life, you'll probably come across this again. So, our last rhetorical appeal is pathos, also pronounced pathos. You'll hear me switch between them randomly at all times. Um, so, you are in the presence of pathos when an author is working to accomplish his or her purpose by making the audience feel a certain way, feel some feelings, feel ways. Right? The author might make the audience feel all kinds of ways by appealing to their values, desires, hopes, and dreams. You'll notice I put an asterisk there because values can be a dangerous one. If an author is focusing on shared values between himself or herself or whatever pronoun self and the audience, and like they're trying to build credibility using that appeal to values, that's ethos. But here, if the values are being mentioned in order to trigger some kind of emotional response, now that would be an example of pathos, argument of emotion. So example, right? Same-sex marriage will even further strengthen the sanctity of the institution, right? So many people value marriage. They value of the sanctity of marriage and the. Now, this is a value that may be that would make people feel happy about the idea that same-sex couples could get married. If it engenders happiness, it's definitely an argument of pathos. Another example: to achieve happiness, all you have to do is get or buy X and Y. Might be a bit of a logical thing there, but I want to focus on this idea that the argument would be trying to make you feel happy. Maybe it's a commercial where there's a product shown with some really happy looking content person. They're trying to make you think, oh, if I can, all I need is to have that thing, and I can feel like that lady on the screen or whatever. So, also appeals to fears, prejudices, guilt, altruism, love, care, essentially any emotion, right? So there's this religious argument. It's a fear argument. If you do X, you're going to Y bad place. In Christianity, they would say hell. You're going to hell if you do blank and blank, right? That's a fire and brimstone. Be afraid. Um, that is definitely a an emotional argument there in the background. She is like, "Please pet me," and it makes me feel all kinds of ways. It's very convincing. Here's this one. If you actually love her, you will do X, right? It's appealing to love. So just anytime an author is doing something or making some surface level rhetorical choice that is intended to make the author feel a certain way, it's an example of pathos. Please know that in true argumentation, that is like formal, logical presentation of claims and evidence, that is, or emotional appeals alone are fallacious. Like emotional appeal is a fallacy. They're weak or bad arguments. But persuasion is a different thing. Persuasion is just trying to get someone to do or believe something. And that's different than argumentation. Appeals to pathos can at the same time, or can at once be not acceptable in formal logical argumentation and still be incredibly persuasive. And people are persuaded all the time, every day, in by emotional appeals. Here's one of my favorite examples of pathos in popular culture. Coach Carr in the 2004 movie Mean Girls has this little scene that I love because I teach living skills, which includes sex ed at Pally, or during the summer rather, PUSD summer school. Right, don't have sex because you'll get pregnant and die. Don't touch each other, but if you do touch each other, you will get chlamydia and die. Right, that is like a it's supposed to strike fear into the hearts of the students listening to the coach talk about this. Of course, the ultimate rhetorical purpose there is to satirize the abstinence only sexual health education that takes place in a lot of schools in the United States and is totally ineffective and just results in a lot of unwanted pregnancies and STDs and other stuff that is making me want to just change the slide. So, how about some practice? Here's what I want you to do. Please prepare a spot to write. It could be paper. It could be one of those little sticky notes on your computer. It could be a Word doc or a Google Doc or a notepad or text edit or whatever floats your boat. And I want you to create 4 spaces, one for rhetorical purpose, one for ethos, one for pathos, and one for logos. And then once you do that, I want you to copy those 4 spaces again, right? So type in all 4 of those things and then copy them. So you have 2 of them that you can use because there are 2 practice examples on the coming slides. Pause the video, do that right now, and we'll practice. Okay, cool. So on the next slide, an image is going to appear. I'm asking you to first, in a few words, maybe half a sentence, right, determine the most salient, the most obvious, important rhetorical purpose of the image. Then I want you to explain how the image uses ethos, pathos, and logos. The images use all 3 to achieve their rhetorical purpose. Please be sure that you're referring to specific pieces of evidence in the image to support what you're saying. Again, it's super important, like that you're saying specific surface piece, connecting that to a rhetorical appeal, and then connecting that to purpose. The connections between all 3 should be crystal clear to you. So here's the first image. Pause the video, look at the image, consume the image, complete that section, then we'll go over it. Okay, now let's go over it. So rhetorical purpose, of course, to convince those driving by. Be sure you mention audience and purpose. It's a good habit always. That's those driving by. It's a billboard. It's to convince them to pull off the freeway or pull off the highway and buy a Whopper, right? A Whopper, of course, is just a big old burger sold by Burger King. They seem to have gotten smaller, but that's beside the point. So, appeal to ethos is, of course, found in the logo itself, right? The logo for Burger King immediately gives the burger credibility. Americans know Burger King. It's a well-known company. People know they can trust that they're going to get a good fast food burger from them. As far as fast food burgers go, they can only be so good, but you get the point. Pathos, well, there's this giant, exaggerated, perfectly arranged burger on the right hand side. It appeals to this common feeling of desire in humans, hunger, right? People feel hungry. I know when I was looking at that, I was very hungry. So you might be too. I hope it's not almost lunchtime as you're watching this. If it is, go eat some food. And then a logos, right? So buy one, get one free right there in the middle is the logical argument. There's the major premise, right? Getting a lot for your money is a good thing. Minor premise, buying one burger will get you a lot for your money. That is two burgers. Therefore, buying one burger is a good thing, and you should buy a burger. So, next practice. Use the next little space you created. Pause the video, look at it, think about it. Make sure you know who that is, and if you don't, you should Google it. Okay, now let's go over this one. So, radical purpose, okay, to convince the viewers of the advertisement to drink Gatorade. That's the goal here. Ethos. Well, Michael Jordan is a famous basketball player. I think that's who that's pictured. Pretty sure. The He's consuming the Gatorade. So an athlete would have the credibility to make claims about sports drinks, right? There's this connection there. Like he's an athlete. He's drinking a sports drink. Athletes are the people who at least purportedly have the authority to talk about sports drinks. Um, so also the Gatorade logo itself, as is true of most logos, they're a source of credibility. Most people viewing the image here would recognize the brand. They would know that the company produces a decent product. Very sugary. Don't overdrink them, right? You may as well just drink soda at that point. But they're pretty good in small quantities. Um, right? Pathos. Well, is it in you? Right? This can be interpreted to mean, do you have what it takes to be a great athlete like Michael Jordan? It's an appeal to a person's sense of self-confidence, appeal to a person's desire to be competitive. It might get at their fear of being perceived as inadequate or weak. There's this idea in American culture that to be a man you have to be competitive and confident and really strong and good at sports and never back down and on and on. Gross. So the all that is sort of bound up in those four words. Is it in you? And it's definitely an appeal to pathos, an appeal to pride, maybe. And then logos. Well, Michael Jordan is drinking the Gatorade. This makes a logical argument. It's closely tied to the appeal to pathos, right? There's a reason why they use Michael Jordan in this image. So the major premise is you want to be a strong athlete like Michael Jordan. Minor premise would be drinking Gatorade can make you a strong athlete like Michael Jordan. Therefore, you should drink Gatorade. Okay. If you have any questions about the answers to these two, that would be a good reason to come to tutorial if you're one of my students. Also, if you're among my students, the practice can be found at this link. This link is also, of course, in Schoology. It's part of your asynchronous learning activities for our class this week. So that's all I have for you. Thank you, and we will go over that practice in class as soon as time allows.